Every morning, millions of older adults with diabetes sit down to what they believe is a safe, reasonable breakfast. They pour themselves a bowl of something they have eaten for decades, something that feels light, something the box even calls healthy. And they take their medication, check off that mental box, and move forward with their day feeling like they are doing things right. But here is what most of those people do not know. That breakfast, the one sitting in nearly every kitchen cabinet in America, may be doing more damage to their blood sugar in the first 30 minutes of the morning than almost anything else they eat all day. And for anyone over 60 with diabetes, that damage compounds in ways that go far beyond a single reading on a glucose monitor. My name is Dr. Michael Carver. I've spent over 22 years working with diabetic patients, many of them in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. I have reviewed thousands of dietary logs, tracked glucose patterns, and had hundreds of conversations with patients who were confused about why their numbers were difficult to control despite doing what they believed was everything right. And again, one specific category of food kept appearing at the top of the problem. Not candy, not soda, not obvious junk food. It was breakfast cereal, specifically the processed grain-based cereals that have been marketed to older adults as heart-healthy, fiber-rich, and appropriate for blood sugar management. Many of them carry official-sounding certifications and reassuring language on the front of the package. And for a diabetic over 60, they can be genuinely dangerous. I want to tell you about a patient I will call Harold. He was 67 years old, had been managing type 2 diabetes for about 8 years, and came to me frustrated. His morning blood sugar readings were consistently elevated despite taking his medication faithfully and avoiding sweets. He ate what he described as a clean breakfast every day: bran flakes with low-fat milk and a small glass of orange juice. It sounded reasonable. It was in fact the core of his problem. When we replaced that single breakfast, his fasting numbers began to improve within 2 weeks. His energy in the morning stabilized, and his A1C dropped meaningfully at his next check. What Harold experienced is not unusual. It is something I see repeatedly. And in this video, I am going to explain exactly why this happens inside the body, which specific breakfast foods are the most dangerous for diabetic seniors, what they do to your blood sugar, your blood vessels, and your long-term organ health, and what you should be eating instead. Stay with me, because the first piece of information I am going to share is the one most people with diabetes are never told clearly enough. Let me explain what is actually happening inside your body when you eat that bowl of cereal in the morning, because once you understand the mechanism, the danger becomes impossible to ignore. Most people with diabetes have been told to watch their sugar intake, so they avoid candy bars, skip dessert, and stay away from obviously sweet foods. What they have not been told clearly enough is that processed grains behave almost identically to pure sugar once they enter the digestive system. The difference between a bowl of cornflakes and a spoonful of table sugar in terms of what happens to your blood glucose is far smaller than most people realize. Here is what happens. The moment you swallow processed cereal, your digestive system breaks it down rapidly. These are highly refined carbohydrates with very little structural integrity left. The fiber has been stripped away or reduced during manufacturing. The complex grain structure has been flattened, extruded, puffed, or flaked into a form that digests almost instantly. Within minutes, glucose floods the bloodstream. Think of it like this. Imagine your blood vessels as a delivery network. Glucose is the cargo. In a healthy system, cargo arrives steadily and gets delivered efficiently. But when processed cereal hits your system, it is like hundreds of delivery trucks flooding a 2-lane road all at once. The system cannot process the load fast enough. Traffic backs up. Damage begins. For someone without diabetes, the pancreas can respond quickly with enough insulin to manage that surge. For someone over 60 with type 2 diabetes, that response is compromised. Either the pancreas cannot produce insulin fast enough, or the body's cells have become resistant to the insulin that is produced, or both. The glucose surge has nowhere to go efficiently. Blood sugar spikes sharply and stays elevated far longer than it should. And here is what makes the morning particularly dangerous. After a night of fasting, your body is already primed to release stored glucose. Your liver does this naturally in the early hours to prepare you for the day. It is called the dawn phenomenon. For diabetics over 60, this means blood sugar is already climbing before you even take your first bite. Adding a high glycemic processed cereal on top of that early morning rise creates a compounded spike that many medications struggle to manage effectively. That spike is not just a number on a monitor. What happens inside your blood vessels, your kidneys, and your nerves during that spike is what the next chapter is going to show you. When blood sugar spikes sharply after a high glycemic breakfast, most people focus on the number itself. They watch the reading rise, wait for it to come back down, and assume that once it normalizes, the danger has passed. That assumption is one of the most costly misunderstandings in diabetic self-management, especially for older adults. The truth is that the damage happens during the spike, not after it. Every time blood glucose rises sharply and rapidly, it triggers a process inside your blood vessels called glycation. This is where excess glucose molecules attach directly to proteins in the vessel walls. Over time, this stiffens the vessels, narrows them, and disrupts the delicate inner lining called the endothelium. That lining is responsible for regulating blood flow, preventing clots, and controlling inflammation. When it is repeatedly damaged by glucose spikes, it loses that ability. For a person over 60, this matters enormously. The blood vessels are already less elastic than they were at 40. The repair mechanisms are slower. The margin for repeated insult is narrower. A younger person can absorb dozens of glucose spikes with relatively minor cumulative damage. An older adult with diabetes is working with a system that is already operating under stress. Every unnecessary spike accelerates the deterioration. Now consider what those vessels are supplying. They feed your heart, your kidneys, your eyes, and the smallest nerve fibers in your feet and legs. These are exactly the organs that diabetic complications destroy first. And the research is consistent on this point. Postprandial glucose spikes, meaning the sharp rises that occur after meals, are strongly associated with cardiovascular events, kidney decline, and worsening neuropathy in older diabetic patients. Here is the action step for this chapter. Starting today, begin paying attention not just to your fasting blood sugar reading in the morning, but to how you feel approximately 1 hour after breakfast. If you experience fatigue, brain fog, increased thirst, or a sensation of heaviness, those are signals that your post-meal glucose has spiked significantly. Many older adults dismiss these as normal aging. They are not. They are your body telling you that the meal you just ate pushed your blood sugar into a damaging range. A glucose monitor used 1 hour after your first bite of breakfast can give you information your fasting reading never will. That single measurement repeated over a week can reveal exactly how much damage your current breakfast is causing. What drives those spikes goes deeper than just the cereal itself. The next chapter will show you the specific ingredients inside these products that make them particularly dangerous for diabetic seniors. If you looked at the nutrition label on most popular breakfast cereals marketed to health-conscious older adults, you would likely see words like whole grain, high fiber, heart healthy, and low fat. These labels are not accidental. They are carefully constructed to create a sense of medical credibility. And for someone managing diabetes over 60, they can be genuinely misleading. Let me walk you through what is actually inside these products and why each component creates a specific problem for aging diabetic physiology. The first issue is the glycemic index of processed grains. Even cereals made from oats, bran, or whole wheat undergo industrial processing that dramatically increases how quickly they digest. Rolled oats, for example, digest meaningfully faster than steel-cut oats because more surface area has been exposed during processing. Puffed wheat and corn-based cereals digest almost as rapidly as white bread. The grain source matters less than most people assume. The processing is what determines the glucose impact. The second issue is added sugar. The sugar content listed on cereal labels is almost always underreported in its practical effect because it does not account for the glucose load of the refined starch base itself. When you add 2 to 5 grams of listed added sugar to a refined grain base that converts to glucose almost immediately, the combined effect on blood sugar is substantially higher than either component suggests on its own. The third issue is the absence of meaningful protein and fat in most breakfast cereals. Protein and fat are the 2 macronutrients that slow gastric emptying, meaning they slow down how quickly food moves from your stomach into your intestines. When that process is slowed, glucose enters the bloodstream more gradually. A meal with adequate protein and healthy fat produces a far more manageable glucose curve than the same number of calories from refined carbohydrates alone. Most processed cereals contain almost no protein and virtually no fat. They are engineered to produce rapid digestion. The fourth issue applies specifically to people over 60. Aging reduces the efficiency of the incretin response, which is a hormonal mechanism that helps regulate the insulin response after eating. This means that even a moderate glucose load from breakfast produces a sharper, longer spike in an older diabetic than the same meal would in a younger person. The practical action step here is straightforward. Before your next grocery purchase, look past the front of the box. Check the total carbohydrate content per serving, not just the sugar line. If a serving contains more than 25 grams of total carbohydrates with less than 5 grams of fiber and less than 6 grams of protein, that cereal is not appropriate for a diabetic over 60, regardless of what the front label claims. Understanding the ingredients is important, but the consequences of continuing to eat these foods go further than morning glucose readings. The next chapter will show you where the long-term damage accumulates. There is a phrase used in diabetes medicine that most patients never hear from their doctors during a standard appointment. It is called cumulative glycemic burden. It refers to the total amount of blood sugar stress your organs absorb over months and years, not just in a single reading or a single meal. And it is this cumulative burden that determines how quickly diabetic complications develop and how severe they become. When a diabetic senior over 60 eats a high glycemic breakfast every morning, they are not simply having one bad meal. They are beginning every single day with a glucose spike that stresses their vascular system, their kidneys, and their nerves before the morning is even finished. Multiply that by 365 days per year. Multiply it by the number of years the habit has continued. The accumulated damage is significant. Let me be specific about where that damage shows up. In the kidneys, repeated glucose spikes increase the filtration pressure on structures called the glomeruli. These are tiny filtering units that clean the blood. Under chronic glucose stress, they become scarred and less efficient. The earliest sign is usually a protein called microalbumin appearing in the urine. Most patients are not tested for this until kidney function has already declined meaningfully. In the eyes, the small blood vessels supplying the retina are extremely sensitive to glucose fluctuation. Repeated spikes cause these vessels to leak, swell, and eventually form abnormal new growths that threaten vision. Diabetic retinopathy is one of the leading causes of blindness in older adults, and postprandial spikes are a primary driver of its progression. In the nerves, particularly those in the feet and legs, excess glucose damages the protective myelin sheath surrounding nerve fibers. Think of electrical wires that have had their insulation worn away. Signals become unreliable, sensations become distorted, and pain, numbness, and burning develop. This is diabetic neuropathy, and for seniors over 60, it also dramatically increases the risk of falls, undetected foot injuries, and serious infections. The action step here is a mindset shift. Every breakfast is not a neutral event. It is either protecting those organs or contributing to their decline. The question to ask yourself each morning is simple. Will this meal keep my blood sugar stable for the next 2 hours, or will it push it into a damaging range? That single question, asked consistently, changes the trajectory of long-term health in meaningful ways. What comes next is something I want you to hear clearly, because it is the part of this conversation that most seniors find both surprising and immediately actionable. Before I continue, I want to pause for a moment and ask you something directly. If you are watching this and you currently eat cereal, toast, bagels, instant oatmeal, or fruit juice as part of your regular morning routine, and you are managing diabetes over 60, I want you to leave a comment below with the word morning. Just that one word. It will help me understand how many people this issue is directly affecting, and it will help other seniors watching this video know that they are not alone in this situation. Now let me continue, because what I'm about to share is the part of this conversation that most diabetes management programs do not address clearly enough. There is a concept called the breakfast precedent effect. It is not a clinical term, but it describes something that is very well documented in glucose research. The meal you eat first thing in the morning sets the hormonal and metabolic tone for the rest of the day. A high glycemic breakfast does not simply cause one spike and then resolve cleanly. It creates a physiological pattern where your body remains in an elevated insulin response state for hours afterward. This means that even if you eat a reasonable lunch, your glucose response to that lunch will be more exaggerated than it would have been if your morning had started with a stable, low glycemic breakfast. Researchers call this the second meal effect. One poor breakfast creates a cascade that makes every subsequent meal harder for your body to handle correctly. For a diabetic senior, this is critical information. It means that fixing breakfast is not just about one meal. It is about resetting the entire day's metabolic environment. Patients who shift to a high-protein, low-glycemic breakfast consistently report more stable energy, fewer afternoon cravings, better midday glucose readings, and improved sleep quality, because blood sugar instability late in the day also disrupts overnight glucose regulation. The next chapter will take this further because there is one specific breakfast food that I want to address directly. It is consumed by millions of diabetic seniors every morning, and it is considered by most of them to be perfectly safe. That food is instant oatmeal. I want to be precise here because this is where many older adults with diabetes become confused. They have heard that oats are good for blood sugar. They have read that oatmeal lowers cholesterol. Their doctor may have even suggested it. And in one specific form, that advice is not wrong. But the form matters enormously, and the form most people are actually eating is the wrong one. Steel-cut oats are a fundamentally different food from instant oatmeal, despite coming from the same grain. Steel-cut oats are minimally processed. The kernel structure remains largely intact. Digestion is slow. Glucose enters the bloodstream gradually, producing a manageable curve. For many diabetic seniors, steel-cut oats prepared correctly can be a reasonable breakfast option. Instant oatmeal is a different matter entirely. The oats have been pre-cooked, rolled extremely thin, and often dried. This processing removes most of the structural resistance that makes oats beneficial. The result digests almost as rapidly as white bread. The glycemic index of instant oatmeal is substantially higher than steel-cut oats, and in flavored varieties, the added sugar compounds the problem further. But the concern does not stop at the oatmeal itself. Consider what most people add to it. A drizzle of honey, considered natural and therefore safe. A splash of fruit juice on the side. A banana, because fruit is healthy. Each of these additions is a source of rapidly absorbed glucose. Individually, each one seems minor. Combined with a bowl of instant oatmeal, they create a breakfast that sends blood sugar rising sharply in a diabetic senior within 20 to 30 minutes. I had a patient, a 71-year-old woman I will call Margaret, who was eating this exact combination every morning. Instant oatmeal with honey, a glass of apple juice, and half a banana. She was genuinely trying to be healthy. Her morning glucose readings were consistently between 180 and 220. When we replaced that breakfast with 2 eggs, half an avocado, and a small portion of plain Greek yogurt with no added sugar, her morning readings dropped to between 95 and 115 within 10 days. Same medication, same exercise routine, only the breakfast changed. That result is not unusual. It reflects the direct and powerful impact that breakfast composition has on daily glucose control in older diabetic adults. And it raises a very important question about what the safer alternatives actually look like in practical terms. This is the part of the conversation where I want to address a misconception that comes up repeatedly among my older patients. Many of them believe that if a food is low in fat, it is safe for diabetes. This idea was heavily promoted for decades, and it remains deeply embedded in how many seniors make food choices. It is not accurate, and for diabetic management, it can be actively misleading. Fat does not raise blood sugar. Carbohydrates raise blood sugar. Refined carbohydrates raise it sharply. Fat, particularly the healthy unsaturated fats found in eggs, nuts, avocado, and olive oil, actually helps slow the absorption of glucose by delaying gastric emptying. A breakfast that contains meaningful fat alongside protein is not dangerous for a diabetic senior. In most cases, it is significantly more protective than a low-fat, high-carbohydrate alternative. The low-fat breakfast foods that have been marketed to health-conscious older adults for decades, including low-fat granola, fat-free flavored yogurt, fruit-based cereal bars, and skim milk with cereal, are in many cases among the worst options available for diabetic glucose control. They replace fat with refined carbohydrates and added sugar to maintain palatability. The result is a product that looks responsible on the label and functions like a glucose delivery system inside the body. The practical clarification here is this. When you're evaluating a breakfast food for diabetes management over 60, the questions that matter most are not how much fat does it contain or is it marketed as heart healthy. The questions that matter are how many total carbohydrates does it contain, how much protein does it provide, and how quickly will it digest. Those three factors determine the glucose impact. The fat content is largely irrelevant and often works in your favor when it comes from quality sources. Understanding what to avoid is only half the solution. The next chapter is entirely devoted to what you should be doing instead, with specific practical options that are realistic for daily life. Let me now give you a clear and practical action framework that you can begin using immediately. The goal for breakfast when you are managing diabetes over 60 is straightforward. You want a meal that keeps your blood sugar stable for at least 2 to 3 hours after eating, provides adequate protein to preserve muscle mass, includes enough healthy fat to slow digestion and support satiety, and contains minimal, rapidly digestible carbohydrates. Here's what that looks like in practice. Eggs are one of the most powerful breakfast foods available to a diabetic senior. They are essentially zero on the glycemic index. 2 or 3 eggs prepared in any way, scrambled, poached, or soft-boiled, provide high-quality protein, healthy fat, and essential nutrients including choline, which supports brain function. Pairing eggs with half an avocado adds monounsaturated fat, potassium, and additional fiber with almost no glucose impact. Plain Greek yogurt, specifically the full-fat or low-fat unsweetened varieties, provides protein and beneficial probiotics with a manageable carbohydrate load. Adding a small handful of walnuts or almonds increases healthy fat and slows digestion further. A few fresh berries, particularly blueberries or raspberries, provide antioxidants with relatively low sugar content compared to most other fruits. If you prefer a warm breakfast, steel-cut oats prepared with water and topped with a tablespoon of almond butter and a sprinkle of cinnamon is a far better choice than instant oatmeal with honey. The almond butter adds protein and fat that blunts the glucose response. Cinnamon has been shown in multiple studies to improve insulin sensitivity modestly in diabetic patients. What you want to eliminate or drastically reduce from your morning routine includes all processed grain cereals regardless of their marketing claims, instant oatmeal in flavored or sweetened varieties, fruit juice of any kind including orange and apple juice, toast made from white or refined bread, bagels, pastries, and flavored yogurts with added sugar. These foods, consumed in the morning by a diabetic senior, are doing measurable harm to blood vessels, kidneys, and nerves every single time they are eaten. One additional step that I strongly recommend is this. Begin testing your blood glucose 1 hour after breakfast for at least 1 week using your current meals. Write the number down. Then shift to one of the breakfast options I described and test again at the same time for another week. The difference in those numbers will show you more clearly than anything I can say exactly how much your morning meal has been affecting your health. If you take only one action from this entire video, let it be this. Change your breakfast. Do it consistently for 2 weeks. Then speak with your doctor about what you find. That conversation will be far more productive when you arrive with 2 weeks of specific post-meal glucose data in your hand. I want to close this conversation with something important. If you have been eating cereal, toast, instant oatmeal, or fruit juice every morning for years, and you have diabetes over 60, I do not want you to feel that you have done something wrong. The messaging around these foods has been deeply misleading for a very long time. Products that spike blood sugar rapidly have been marketed as healthy choices for older adults with remarkable consistency and remarkable inaccuracy. You made decisions based on the information available to you. That is all any of us can do. What matters now is what you do with clearer information. The research on this is not ambiguous. Postprandial glucose spikes driven by high glycemic breakfast foods cause real, measurable, cumulative damage to the vascular system, the kidneys, the eyes, and the nerves of older adults with diabetes. That damage is not inevitable. It is largely preventable through dietary decisions that are within your control starting tomorrow morning. You do not need a complicated plan. You do not need expensive supplements or dramatic lifestyle overhauls. You need to replace one meal. The meal that starts your day and, as we covered, sets the metabolic tone for everything that follows. Replace the cereal with eggs. Replace the juice with water. Replace the instant oatmeal with a protein-centered alternative. Give it 2 weeks. Measure what happens. Then talk to your doctor. Early awareness is one of the most powerful tools available in managing diabetes after 60. The seniors who maintain the best outcomes over time are not necessarily those on the most aggressive medication regimens. They are often the ones who understand clearly what their body is responding to and make consistent, informed decisions in response to that understanding. If this video gave you useful information, I want to ask you to do one thing right now. Share it with someone you care about who is managing diabetes or who is over 60 and concerned about their blood sugar. They may be sitting down to the same harmful breakfast tomorrow morning without knowing what it is doing to them. Your share could change that. If you found this helpful and want to continue receiving this type of evidence-based health information designed specifically for older adults, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We cover the topics that matter most to seniors and their families with the clarity and honesty that this audience deserves. Take care of yourself. Make tomorrow morning different. And remember that the choices that protect your health most powerfully are often the simplest ones, once you know what you are actually choosing between.